Paul said that God has prepared much greater blessings for us than we can presently understand. And that's a theme that's echoed throughout the scriptures. So here's a question for you. If everything has a cost, and if we don't know the value of the greatest things, how do we know what prices are worth paying? It's quite a mystery. No one really talks about that. In fact, in our society, there are many voices that claim that you can get something for nothing. But God will not be mocked. You reap what you sow. So I'd like to go over a few verses from Alma 26, which is where the sons of Mosiah are reflecting on the outcomes of their missionary labor. But I'll give you the bottom line up front. You obtain blessings greater than you can currently comprehend through faithfully following the paths to the things that you currently desire the most. You should rewind that and listen to it a couple of times. There's no mysterious left out bit between where you are and where you want to be. It doesn't require some fantastic thing that's not already in place. The pathway to everything you want lies exactly through everything you already know about but aren't living up to. The second, and I do mean the second, that you comply with the best that you know, God will give you more. He will send into your life through miraculous means, if necessary, whatever's required to take the next step. There is no such thing as waiting on God. Not really, not the way people mean it when they say that. The only thing you could connect to that that's true is a sense that there might be more steps to what you actually want than you currently realize, and you need to be patient as God leads you through those steps. One of the principal blessings of the gospel is access to outcomes that are much greater than we can currently comprehend and whose paths are beyond our current understanding. This is a chief role of angels. When angels minister to us, one of the reasons they're sent is to help guide us to blessings that are greater than what we would know to seek on our own or know how to find on our own. But that's not how we live our lives. We live our lives pretending that somehow we know the way and that what we want is what we should want. That somehow we know what we want is like before we have it. But the key to all of this is just doing what we have sufficient reason to do right now. And when you construct the path in retrospect, you can't help but see the hand of God every step of the way guiding you to greater things than you knew to seek or than you knew how to seek. So I'm going to give you two positive examples and one negative example from my life, in addition to what we're going to read here from the scriptures. So let's start with those examples first, because otherwise I'm going to forget them. But I'm holding the Book of Mormon in my hand, so I won't forget that. So two examples are connected to the talk that I gave on June 19th. So from my perspective, I had a reason that I needed to go to Utah, and I really didn't want to go. But I prayed and I said, Lord, is there anything you need me to do while I'm down there? Is there anything I can do for you while I'm down there? And he said, yes, I want you to go down there and give a talk on Matthew 23:23. And I said, okay. And then my original reason for going down there became a way lower priority to giving the talk. And if that had fallen through, I would have come anyway. So then I announced that, and I think 2 days later, I don't remember, it was a Sunday, I had received 2 invites from people to host me because I had put out a blog post saying that this was something I was going to do. Is there a place we can do it? And so the first one that worked out, we set it up, and I put an announcement on Sunday that I was going to be giving a talk the following Wednesday. And so at that talk, it was great. I had the opportunity to meet many of you who I had not met face to face before, and that was fun. And more importantly, I had the opportunity to say the things I was supposed to say in a group, and then one-on-one afterwards in the mingle session when everyone got a chance to get to know each other. I had some really important one-on-one conversations with people that I think helped them. But in one of those conversations, I got to know a man who was sharing with me some of the successes he's had as he's tried to apply some of the things I've taught about helping your children to take more ownership over their scripture study and their relationship with God. And he had asked his son to read a little slower and on his own to come up with questions that he would try to find the answers to, and then he wanted to talk to him about it. And in one of those feedback sessions, his son said that he didn't understand what Matthew 23:23 meant. And that conversation happened on the same Sunday I announced the talk. And I didn't know that before I went, that God was answering the prayer of this man's son through what he told me. But that happens. And if you allow yourself to be used by the Lord, he will use you to answer other people's prayers. This is not a blessing reserved for some special people. It's something that is our birthright as the children of God, to stand in his place and do what he would do if he were there, up to the limit of what we're capable of. And so the question becomes, what are you willing to do? And that's the limiting factor. And then the second limiting factor is on a longer term basis, not in the moment, on a longer term basis, how much will you yield to his shaping? So anyone familiar with blacksmithing knows that the metal doesn't just come out of nowhere. There's a whole process to get the metal you start with when you start blacksmithing. But once you have the piece, you've got to heat it up, you got to whack it a bunch of times in a very particular way with the end product in your mind from the beginning. And you hammer away at this thing, and you heat it and you cool it in very specific ways until it is the tool you intended to make. And each of us has a potential in God's eyes, and you can rest assured that you're not there yet. If you're still kicking, he can shape you even more. And as you yield to that process over time, you wouldn't believe what he can do with you. And it doesn't matter how normal you are. The magic of this process, unlike blacksmithing, it's almost, not totally, it's almost completely detached from what you start with. He is the creator. He's not terribly inhibited by where you start. So, it's very important for us to yield to the instantaneous opportunities for him to use us, which the barrier is almost always embarrassment, risk of failure, emotional investment. It's impossible to love people without giving them weapons to hurt you more effectively. But that's the game we play. Those are the costs of the process. And then also the long-term shaping, to yield to him as his voice is the voice of improvement, as he calls you into your potential. And your willingness to do those two things will dictate how often and to what ends he can use you to answer the prayers of other people. So I didn't know that this man's son was going to get an answer to his prayers through what God told me to say. But I yielded to the sufficient reasons I had to go and say what he told me to say. And in that process, I used all the shaping that God has put me through to this point to deliver the best I could to the people that heard it and the people that will listen to it, and hopefully more than once on the internet, because I posted the audio. So it's called The Weightier Matters, if you haven't heard it yet. But part of my reason for going was that I knew that there was a man who's been praying for a very long time, years, for a certain blessing. And it's a blessing that I know the path to because I've received it in spades. And maybe 2/3 of what I said in that talk could be directly applied to this man's situation. And if applied, it would absolutely lead him over every barrier, preventing him presently from having what he seeks, and much more than that. In his particular case, I easily gave a lifetime worth of things to apply. He wouldn't run out of it. But that man didn't go. And so one person might look at this and say, well, one of the main reasons for you coming and driving 16 hours round trip in 2 days didn't happen. Isn't that disappointing? Well, sure. I mean, in a very real way, I care about this man. But was it a failure? No. God leads us to do what we need to do for the best possible outcome through what we want and how we see things right now. This, you just can't break this. It really is true. Last example from my own life, I want to share with you a story from my friend, and I'm going to anonymize this a bit. He had some reasons to believe that, boy, I don't know how much I can anonymize this. He had reasons to believe that there was a place that he should move. And they're simple reasons. They're probably the same reasons all of you have for moving, or should have. But it didn't look like there was any possibility to move and still have a job. So he found one business that does what he does in the place he wanted to move to. And there are excessively long odds that there was not going to be a job opportunity there. They didn't have any openings posted. And it, just a small business. So he cold called this place, and he said, hey, I'd really like to live there. If you guys have any openings, can I give you my information? You keep me in mind. And they said, oh, actually, we have a person who's getting ready to retire. I hope I'm getting all the details correct here. But it's close enough, if not. We have a person that's getting ready to retire, and they're in your same position where you are right now. So let me forward you to the higher ups, and we'll get you on the list. This guy wanted to move. His family is not interested in moving, not at all. He brought it up. They were not at all interested. And most people would look at that and say, well, this is an insurmountable barrier. This is dead in the water. I'm not even going to move forward on it. But this guy has faith. And by faith, what I mean is he's willing to do what he has sufficient reason to do. And so he said, look, I'm not committing to moving by calling this business. I'm not committing to moving by sending my resume. I'm not committing to moving by interviewing. He eventually got an interview. And those were all just small sacrifices. It wasn't a big deal, with a potentially enormous payout whose full magnitude he could not know from the beginning. It was just sufficient reason to take the next step. So another obstacle appeared, which was the enormous timeline that this occurred over. Is months and months. And for some reason, the company was dragging their feet like crazy. But there was no cost for my friend to just keep driving on in his normal life. He already had a job, he already had a place to live, and this was just something on the back burner, no big deal, checking in every couple weeks kind of thing. And again, almost free. Almost free as far as what it took to look at. Now, I do just want to make a lateral side note here that's very important. People who are living emotionally check to check, they are absolutely maxed out in their present life, will not do anything like this, because even just having this possibility in their head will absolutely overwhelm them and they won't move forward, even if it's almost free to do. And so it is really important to develop a surplus in capability. The ability to do more things without getting overwhelmed. Greater order in your present life, so you have surplus to handle things that you're not expecting, or to investigate opportunities for improvement, even if you feel like you don't need them right now. Because you can't know ahead of time what things are going to prove to be absolutely vital in the future. So you always have to do everything you can to be the best that you can. So continuing back into the story. So it took a lot longer than it should have. But finally, the head honcho gets back to my friend and says, hey, so we're going to give you an offer. And we're going to send it to you on paper, make it official. But, we'll just parse out some details here before it comes, so you say yes. And make sure that this is something that you're still excited about and that the terms fit what you want. And he said, by the way, which was a victory of faith, because from the beginning, there were some reasons to believe that maybe the financials of this situation were not going to work out. And so my friend was very upfront. This job would have to pay X for me to take it. And so the head honcho knew from the beginning, and then they kept walking forward with that. And that guy had faith too, because he wasn't sure he was going to be able to make that amount work. But, back and forth, and they're moving forward, and they're really excited. He's a great guy. I don't blame him. I'd be excited too. So then the head honcho says, by the way, we actually just had a surprise retirement in the position above this. And I've gotten to know you through these interviews and everything, and I know what your resume is. You're definitely qualified for that job. And if you'd like, I can't make any promises, but I'd like to include you in the search for that. And if you end up getting that offer, you should take that job instead. And my friend said, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Okay. Could my friend have known, would he have any reason to expect that he would get an opportunity to apply for that higher job in applying for this lower job? Do you see the chain of long shots here, indeterminate outcomes? But he just kept putting his hat in the ring because he said there's sufficient reason to do what it takes to take the next step. That's all it was, all along. And yet I look at my friend as a tremendous example of faith. Tremendous. Because I know a lot of people who wouldn't do any of that, who wouldn't have even taken the first step. The kinds of people who won't even write Amazon reviews. I'll never stop picking that scab. So, but it's an easy, tangible thing. So it's half joking, it's half very serious. So that's what faith is like. And if you want to learn more about this, you should read through Faith, the book I wrote. But let's go to the scriptures. We don't do that enough. And just so you know, that's mostly for time. I know people are overwhelmed already, so I just try to spit out what I need to say as fast as I can, believe it or not. Okay, so this is Alma 26, and I want you to pick out these same patterns of what we've been talking about, that you don't know ahead of time what the outcomes are going to be, but as you step into the things that you do understand, as far as you understand them, the doors will open, and you'll see in much greater detail the worth of the best outcomes, and also the path to them. That's what Through Faith is all about, the book. You really should read it if you haven't. You should read it again, even if you have. Okay, so I just want to pick out a few verses from this. So Ammon is speaking here, and he starts to describe the conditions before they made their trip. So him and his brothers were a couple of thugs, and they went around doing thuggish things. But then they changed their tune, they cleaned up their act, and they thought, they were princes. They said, instead of being the king of this place and or princes under our brother, we want to just let all that go, and we'd actually like to have much greater meaning in life. And instead of ruling over all these things that our father, grandfather set up, we want to march straight into the most dangerous place on earth for us, the land of our mortal enemies, and see if we can't do something about establishing peace between our people. And we'll probably die, and that's okay. And that's just what we're going to do. So, he says, could we have supposed when we started from the land of Zarahemla, which is where they were from, that God would have granted unto us such great blessings? That is a very important question, because the answer is no. They didn't know up front what the outcome would be, which the outcome was that they converted thousands of people. And they single-handedly did what great armies could not do in creating peace between two people that hated each other, two groups of people that absolutely hated each other. And more importantly than that, they led those thousands of people to the Lord, and they were deeply converted. That isn't what they set out to do. They set out to do much less than that. They were happy dying. All they wanted to do was do the best that they could to make up for the terrible people they had been. They knew that their lives were forfeit, that they deserved nothing from God, let alone to be kings in a righteous land. And so they let all that go, and they marched straight into Lamanite territory, preaching the gospel. And the most likely thing was for them to be imprisoned and killed. So, quickly. But if they were lucky, they'd be tortured first. Okay, so then he recounts what these blessings were, which I already mentioned. And then he says, let me find this part. I didn't underline this ahead of time. I can't find it now. When they were setting out to do what they were going to do, everyone laughed at them. Not only did they think it was a terrible idea, they actually laughed at them. And yet, they had every reason to take the steps that they did. Because of that, he says, our joy is full. We will praise our God forever. So joy comes from value. And like I said, you can't know ahead of time what something is worth that lies beyond your comprehension. Eye hath not seen. So how do you come to see? It's only through faith. You can only obtain the things of greatest value through faith. Once you obtain them, if you do it right, you will know what they're worth. And it's only then, when you have the thing and you know what it's worth, that you will have a fullness of joy. You can only have a fullness of joy through faith. You can gain a sense of the value of something in some other way, but you're not going to have the something to keep. That's the snag. If you know that something's tremendously valuable only because you had it and lost it, you will not be full of joy. You'll be full of sorrow. It's only through faith that you can get and keep the greatest things. So, I hope that you think about the application of what we've talked about here to your own life. When you have sufficient reason to do something, when your rational process has suggested that a certain option has the greatest likelihood of the most enduring, greatest outcome, you should go and do that thing. And you shouldn't stop until that changes. No matter how hard it is, the question isn't how hard is this, the question is it worth it? And we do a lot of things that are easy and not worth it. Whatever you do, when you're looking at your potential options, do not throw things out just because you don't see the final outcome. People who do that, people who need to see the whole path before they take the first step, are miserable. They do not encounter lasting, positive outcomes. They have terrible lives, and they have terrible afterlives because they have no faith. These skills are not negotiable in life. Everything you want is absolutely coupled to your ability to exercise faith. So I highly encourage you to master this skill in your own life and read through Faith a couple of times.